Hi everybody, this is Pach, Move Shoot Move Ambassador with 3 Peaks Photography. It's New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year! I am out on the eastern plains of Colorado on private property which I have permission to be on, and I am excited to be using my brand new Nomad tracker from Move Shoot Move for the first time. I'm going to head up the hill behind me to that farmhouse and try to get some great shots of the night sky. The clouds are supposed to clear, so it's looking good, except it's going to be cold. So I'm bundled up. I also brought with me my auxiliary battery, so in case the battery in the Nomad doesn't like the cold, I can plug this guy in to the port on the side right over here, and I have a long enough cable that I can rest this in my rock bag, and that'll be just fine as long as it's not windy. You can see that I have my tracker set up on top of my Benro 3-way geared head, and then my ball head is attached to the plate that is on the rotating surface of the Nomad. I have the laser pointer attached to the back of the Nomad, and it's going to shine through this little hole that's in the front. You can refer to my earlier video on how to set up the Nomad for all of these details. Another thing that I want to point out is the little switch that's on this side of the Nomad. It is the only switch or button that is on this tracker, and it is used to turn it on and start it rotating. In the center position, it's off. If you flip it to N, that's rotating for the northern hemisphere. If you flip it to S, that's rotating for the southern hemisphere. So I'm going to get prepared for being out in the cold, so I've got even more warm clothes to put on. And one of the traditions that we have here in Colorado Springs for New Year's Eve is fireworks off the summit of Pikes Peak, and I have a clear view of the summit from here, and I could probably see the fireworks if I'm going to be out here till midnight. The moon's supposed to come up about 9:20, so I'm not sure if I'm going to stay here that long, but we're hoping that the clouds clear as predicted and that I get some great shots. So any shots that I get, I am going to add those to this video with all of the details so that you can learn more about using this tracker. Well, that was a cold yet successful night out on the eastern plains of Colorado. I managed to get a few shots with my MSM Nomad, and I'm going to show you some of those. And the first 3 are just different variations of the same photo with different exposure times and settings, and they are blends of 2 images, one for the foreground and one for the sky. The first one here is a 2-minute exposure at f4 and ISO of 800. I like to keep the same settings between my foreground and sky photos so that when I blend them together, they look natural. And if you look at my layers panel here, basically I only need 2, maybe 3 layers. This top layer is a blank layer that I'm using to correct any spots, stuck pixels, or things that I want to remove. So that's a technique that's non-destructive if you're using the clone stamp or the spot healing brush, for example. You can create a new layer and make sure that the little box is checked to sample all layers, and then any corrections you make will be applied to all the layers that are below this blank layer. So what we want to do is look at the other 2 layers. What I use when I'm doing these types of blends is the Select Sky feature. If you go up to the Select menu and you select Sky, it's going to select the sky on this middle layer, and then I go into the Select and Mask dialog box, and I choose to create a new mask as my output. When you first create a mask like that, it's going to select the sky because that's what you asked it to do. But we want to save the foreground in this particular case for this image, so I have to invert the mask, and then you can see on the mask itself, anything that is black is going to let the information from the layer below show through. Anything that's white is going to allow the information on this layer to be visible. So if we go down to the bottom layer, this is my shot for the sky, and you can see I'm a little bit misaligned, and that's on purpose. So if I turn this back on, you can see that my house in the bottom layer is really fuzzy because I used the tracker. This is the shot that I took with the tracker on. So anything that's stationary is going to end up really fuzzy, and the fuzziness increases the longer your exposure is. So normally what I like to do is I like to aim a little bit higher than my foreground object to get more of the sky in that photograph, because I'm going to end up cropping some of that out or hiding it behind the foreground in the stationary shot. So that's what I've done here. I've just moved it a little bit with the move tool so that I could get the fuzzy version of the house behind the still version of the house, and you can see that the roof of the house in this photo is below the roof of the house in this photo, so it's hidden from view. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the mask to make sure everything looks right. And in this case, I extended the canvas size a little bit using the crop tool, so I can get a little bit more of that sky instead of cropping to a regular 2:3 aspect ratio. So I'm not going to go into great detail on all of these methods. I have another video that shows you how to blend these types of photos together inside of Photoshop. So let's look at the next one. This is a 2-minute exposure for the sky and a 4-minute exposure for the house. I got a little help on this one because the friends I was with were leaving, and the lights from their car shined down the house a little bit to give me a little bit extra exposure on there. There was quite a bit of ambient light because of the snow and the light pollution, and so I usually put lights on this house when I photograph it, but I didn't feel I really needed that for what I was doing that night. So for the sky photo, the settings are 2 minutes, f4, ISO 800. The shot for the house was 4 minutes and f4 at ISO 800. I was just experimenting, trying to get a little bit more exposure on the foreground shot. Let's look at the third one. So the settings for both of these photos are the same. 4 minutes of exposure, f4 and ISO 400. Since I doubled my exposure time, I cut my ISO in half. And another thing I want to point out, I mentioned that when I'm doing blends like this, I like to aim up a little bit high to get a little bit more sky in my photo, because I may end up cropping some of that out. I also like to, when I'm shooting my foreground, get more of a straight on shot of the objects in the foreground, in this case my house, because with using that ultra wide angle lens, then it helps with my distortions if I shoot my foreground objects more straight on and then do my blending. Turn everything back on. Okay, and this was facing the north, so I was aligned with the laser to the North Star. And then after a while, I decided to photograph Orion because I had a clear shot of Orion. And here's one of the images I got. So the settings for this photo are 2 minutes of exposure time, f4, ISO 800, And this was shot with my RF 24-105 on my Canon R6, zoomed in all the way to 105 millimeters. And you can see the 3 stars that make up Orion's belt and the Orion Nebula. So I'm pretty happy with this photo. And overall, I'm happy with the way the Nomad performed. I do want to remind you to subscribe to my channel so that you can watch my other videos and learn some other things about astrophotography. I also want to remind you that as an MSM ambassador, you can save 10% off your order through the MSM website with my discount code 3peaksdiscount. So if you're thinking about purchasing the Nomad, or if you're watching this to learn more about how to use the Nomad, I hope this video helped.
Happy New Year.